In a world where strength is measured by the volume of your voice and the size of your muscles, Staff Sergeant Maya Chun proved that the most dangerous weapons are often wrapped in silence. What happened in that training facility on a Tuesday morning would rewrite everything her teammates thought they knew about power, respect, and what it truly means to be elite. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Coronado training facility as Maya Chun laced up her combat boots for what would become the most defining moment of her military career. At 5'4" and weighing barely 125 pounds, she moved through the barracks with a quiet efficiency that had become her trademark over the past 18 months with SEAL Team 7. Her teammates were already gathering in the common area, their voices carrying the familiar blend of caffeine-fueled bravado and morning complaints that filled every military base across the globe. Maya had learned to navigate these morning rituals with careful precision. She spoke when spoken to, contributed when necessary, and maintained the professional distance that seemed to work best for everyone involved. It wasn't that she was unfriendly, exactly. She simply understood that her presence on the team was still being evaluated, measured, and judged by standards that seemed to shift depending on who was doing the measuring. The integration of women into elite special operations units was still relatively new, and Maya knew she carried the weight of that pioneering responsibility on her shoulders every single day. Every mistake would be magnified, every success would be minimized, and every interaction would be analyzed through the lens of whether women truly belonged in these sacred halls of military brotherhood. She had accepted this reality long ago, choosing to focus on excellence rather than acceptance. As she entered the common area, the familiar rhythm of morning banter continued around her. Staff Sergeant Jake Morrison, a towering Texan with arms like tree trunks, was regaling anyone within earshot about his weekend adventures in San Diego. His voice boomed across the room as he described his latest conquest, both romantic and alcoholic, with a kind of detail that made Maya grateful for her morning coffee as a distraction. And then, this blonde walks up to me at the bar. Jake continued, his hands gesturing wildly as he painted his picture, takes one look at these guns, and says she's never seen a real Navy SEAL before. I told her, honey, you're looking at prime military-grade beef right here. The group erupted in the kind of laughter that Maya had learned to recognize as distinctly male, distinctly military, and distinctly exclusive. She sipped her coffee and checked her gear, running through the mental checklist that had become second nature. Today's training schedule included close-quarters combat, weapons maintenance, and tactical movement exercises. Standard Tuesday routine for one of the world's most elite fighting forces. Petty Officer First Class Tommy Rodriguez, compact and wiry with the quick movements of someone who had grown up fighting for everything he had ever received, chimed in with his own weekend story. His Brooklyn accent cut through the California morning air as he described his domination of the local pool hall, taking money from unsuspecting civilians who underestimated the gambling skills of a trained military operative. These college kids thought they could hustle me. Tommy laughed, shaking his head at the memory. I let them win the first 2 games, build up their confidence, then took them for everything they had. Classic mistake, thinking they could outthink someone who's been trained to survive behind enemy lines. Maya finished her coffee and began gathering her gear. She had learned that the best strategy during these morning sessions was to remain peripheral, present enough to avoid seeming antisocial, but distant enough to avoid becoming the target of the kind of attention she preferred to avoid. Her teammates weren't malicious, exactly, but they existed in a world where verbal sparring was a form of bonding, where weakness was exploited mercilessly, and where proving yourself was a daily requirement rather than a one-time achievement. Sergeant Marcus Williams, the team's communications specialist, and a former college football player whose shoulders seemed designed for carrying heavy equipment across hostile terrain, looked up from his equipment check as Maya moved toward the door. Marcus had always been one of the more professional members of the team, treating Maya with a respectful distance that she appreciated, even if it sometimes felt more like tolerance than genuine acceptance. "Chun, you ready for today's circus?" Marcus asked, his question carrying the kind of casual camaraderie that Maya had learned to navigate carefully. Too enthusiastic a response might seem like she was trying too hard to fit in. Too reserved a response might reinforce the perception that she was unfriendly, or worse, that she thought herself above the team's social dynamics. "Always ready, Sergeant," Maya replied, her tone professional but not cold. She had perfected this balance over months of careful observation and adjustment, learning to project competence without arrogance, confidence without aggression, and capability without threatening the established hierarchy that governed military life. As the team began moving toward the training facility, Maya found herself falling in a step beside Corporal Danny Kim, the team's youngest member at barely 22 years old. Danny had joined the team 6 months after Maya, which made him the only person in their unit with less seniority than her. This shared position at the bottom of the pecking order had created a natural, if unspoken, alliance between them. They often found themselves paired together during exercises, united by their mutual understanding of what it felt like to be constantly proving themselves to teammates who had already established their reputations. "You ever get tired of Morrison's stories?" Danny asked quietly, his voice low enough that only Maya could hear. His question carried the weight of someone who was still learning to navigate the complex social dynamics of elite military units, where criticism of team members could be interpreted as disloyalty, but where honest communication was essential for survival in combat situations. Maya considered her response carefully. She had learned that even casual complaints could be weaponized against her if they reached the wrong ears or were interpreted through the wrong lens. Everything she said was measured against the perception that women were inherently more dramatic, more likely to create interpersonal conflict, and less capable of handling the rough camaraderie that was considered essential to military brotherhood. "Morrison's stories are Morrison's stories," Maya replied diplomatically. "As long as they don't interfere with his ability to watch my six in the field, I don't really care what he does in his free time." Danny nodded, understanding the subtext of her response. Maya had mastered the art of maintaining professional relationships without getting drawn into the kind of personal drama that could undermine her position on the team. It was a delicate balance that required constant attention and adjustment, but it had served her well throughout her military career. The training facility buzzed with activity as multiple teams prepared for their morning exercises. Maya could see members of SEAL Team 3 working through hand-to-hand combat drills on the far side of the building, their movements sharp and precise as they practiced the kind of close-quarters techniques that could mean the difference between life and death in hostile territory. The sound of their training provided a steady rhythm of impact and instruction that served as background music to the morning's activities. Team 7 gathered around their assigned training area, where Master Chief Petty Officer Robert Hayes waited with the patient expression of someone who had been conducting these briefings for more than 2 decades. Hayes was old-school Navy, a man who had earned his reputation through action rather than words, and who commanded respect through competence rather than intimidation. Maya appreciated a straightforward approach to leadership, even when that approach meant holding her to standards that sometimes seemed higher than those applied to her male teammates. "Gentlemen," Hayes began, his voice carrying the authority that came from years of leading elite soldiers into impossible situations. "And, Chun, today we're focusing on close-quarters combat scenarios. You'll be working through a series of exercises designed to test your ability to neutralize multiple opponents in confined spaces." The briefing continued with the technical details that Maya absorbed automatically, her mind cataloging the requirements and objectives while simultaneously assessing the physical setup of the training area. She had learned to process information on multiple levels simultaneously, maintaining awareness of the immediate tactical situation while also monitoring the social dynamics of her team and the broader political implications of her performance. Maya noticed Jake Morrison exchanging glances with Tommy Rodriguez, the kind of quick communication that passed between teammates who had worked together long enough to develop their own shorthand. She had observed this dynamic countless times over the past 18 months, the subtle way her male teammates communicated with each other through looks, gestures, and half-finished sentences that excluded her as effectively as if they had spoken in a foreign language. The exclusion wasn't necessarily intentional or malicious, but it was constant and cumulative. Maya existed on the periphery of these micro-interactions, professionally included, but personally isolated, competent but not quite trusted, valued but not quite accepted. She had learned to navigate this social landscape with the same strategic thinking she applied to combat situations. Always aware of her position, always calculating her next move, always conscious of the larger objectives that govern her choices. Master Chief Hayes concluded his briefing and dismissed the team to begin their individual preparations. Maya moved to her assigned equipment station and began the familiar ritual of checking and double-checking her gear. Her weapons were clean and properly maintained. Her protective equipment was adjusted for optimal movement and protection, and her mind was focused on the tactical challenges ahead. As she worked through her preparations, Maya became aware of a conversation taking place at the neighboring equipment station. Jake Morrison and Tommy Rodriguez were discussing the upcoming exercise with Marcus Williams. Their voices low, but not quite quiet enough to prevent Maya from overhearing their exchange. The content of their conversation would prove to be more significant than any of them realized at the time. I'm just saying, Jake was explaining his Texas accent more pronounced when he was making a point he considered important. Some people on this team haven't really been tested under pressure. Real pressure. Not the kind of controlled scenarios we run here, but the kind of chaos you get when everything goes wrong and you're surrounded by people who want to kill you. Tommy nodded agreement, his Brooklyn Street wisdom adding weight to Jake's observation. It's one thing to perform well when you know it's a training exercise, and quite another when lives are actually on the line. Some of us have been there, some of us haven't. Marcus Williams, ever the diplomat, tried to steer the conversation toward more neutral territory. Everyone on this team has earned their place here. The selection process doesn't make mistakes about who belongs in special operations. But Jake wasn't finished making his point. I'm not questioning anyone's qualifications on paper. I'm just saying that when bullets start flying and people start dying, you find out what someone is really made of, and sometimes what they're made of isn't what you thought it was. Maya continued her equipment check, her movements steady and professional despite the growing awareness that she was likely the target of this thinly veiled assessment. She had heard variations of this conversation before, always conducted just within her hearing range, always focused on abstract concepts like pressure and real testing that somehow never seemed to apply to her male teammates who had similar levels of combat experience. The irony wasn't lost on her, that she was being evaluated for theoretical responses to situations that most of her critics had never actually experienced themselves. Jake Morrison, for all his impressive physical presence and confident storytelling, had joined the team only 6 months before Maya and had seen exactly the same amount of combat action as she had. Tommy Rodriguez had slightly more experience, but his reputation was built more on training performance than actual battlefield achievements. Yet somehow the burden of proving herself under real pressure seemed to fall disproportionately on Maya's shoulders. Maya finished her equipment check and moved toward the training area, where Master Chief Hayes was setting up the first exercise scenario. The physical layout was designed to simulate the interior of a building that had been partially damaged by explosives, creating the kind of complex, three-dimensional environment where special operations forces often found themselves operating. Debris and obstacles created natural cover points while also limiting movement options, forcing participants to think creatively about positioning and tactical approaches. As the team gathered around Master Chief Hayes for final instructions, Maya found herself thinking about the conversation she had overheard. The frustrating aspect wasn't the criticism itself, which was part of military culture and something she had learned to accept as inevitable. The frustrating aspect was the way the criticism seemed to exist independently of her actual performance, immune to evidence and resistant to contradiction. Over the past 18 months, Maya had consistently performed at or above the level of her teammates in every measurable category. Her marksmanship scores were excellent, her physical fitness ratings were outstanding, and her tactical decision-making had been praised by instructors and evaluators. Yet somehow these objective measures of competence seemed less important than subjective assessments of her potential performance in theoretical situations that existed primarily in the imaginations of her critics. Master Chief Hayes called the team to attention and began explaining the first exercise scenario. Maya pushed aside her frustrations and focused on the immediate tactical challenge ahead. Whatever doubts her teammates might have about her capabilities, she knew that her performance in the next few hours would speak louder than any conversation conducted over equipment stations. The morning was about to become very interesting indeed, though none of them quite realized just how interesting it would become. Maya-chan was about to demonstrate exactly what she was made of, and the demonstration would prove more memorable than anyone anticipated. The first exercise began with Maya positioned at the entry point of the simulated building structure. Her teammates spread throughout the interior in defensive positions. The scenario was straightforward in concept, but complex in execution. She needed to navigate through the building and neutralize all hostile targets while avoiding civilian casualties and minimizing her own exposure to enemy fire. Master Chief Hayes emphasized that speed and precision would be equally important, as real-world operations rarely provided the luxury of extended planning time. Maya took a deep breath and centered herself, drawing on the meditation techniques she had learned years before joining the military. Her grandfather, a Vietnam veteran who had taught her the value of mental discipline long before she understood its tactical applications, had always emphasized that the mind was the most important weapon any soldier could carry. In the seconds before action, Maya felt his presence and his teachings guiding her approach to the challenge ahead. The whistle sounded, and Maya moved through the entry point with fluid precision. Her movements were economical and purposeful, each step calculated to minimize noise while maximizing her tactical options. She had studied the layout during the briefing and mentally rehearsed multiple approaches, but she also remained flexible enough to adapt her strategy based on the actual conditions she encountered inside the structure. The first hostile target appeared around a corner, approximately 15 feet from the entrance. Maya's response was immediate and decisive, her training weapon finding its mark before her opponent had fully emerged from cover. The laser system registered a clean hit, and the target indicator switched from red to green, signifying successful neutralization. Maya was already moving toward her next position before the electronic confirmation sounded. Her teammates, playing the role of hostile forces for this exercise, had positioned themselves strategically throughout the building. Maya knew that they would be using their knowledge of her typical tactics against her, try to anticipate her movements, and force her into disadvantageous positions. This element of familiarity actually made the exercise more challenging than it would have been with unknown opponents, since her teammates understood her preferred approaches and could counter them effectively. Maya reached the first major decision point in the building's layout, where corridors branched in 3 different directions. Intelligence indicated that hostile forces were positioned down at least 2 of the corridors, but she didn't know which ones or in what strength. This was exactly the kind of situation where tactical decision-making under pressure separated competent soldiers from elite operators. Instead of committing to any single corridor immediately, Maya used a technique she had developed during her previous training, employing sound and movement to gather intelligence about enemy positions without exposing herself to direct fire. She created a small noise disturbance in one direction while moving quietly in another, using the hostile forces' natural reactions to reveal their positions and numbers. The technique worked perfectly. Tommy Rodriguez, positioned down the left corridor, shifted his position slightly in response to the audio distraction, his movement creating just enough visual signature for Maya to identify his location. Similarly, she detected movement from the center corridor, but found no indication of hostile presence down the right passage. This intelligence allowed her to plan an approach that would neutralize the known threats while avoiding potential ambush points. Maya chose to address the center corridor first, reasoning that Tommy's position in the left corridor would be more difficult to escape from once she engaged the central threat. Her approach was methodical and professional, using cover and concealment to close distance while maintaining multiple exit strategies. When she finally engaged the target in the center corridor, Marcus Williams was positioned in an excellent defensive position that would have been nearly impossible to assault directly. Instead of attempting a frontal assault, Maya used the building's damaged structure to her advantage, creating an alternative approach that caught Marcus completely off guard. She climbed through a hole in the wall that connected to an adjacent room, flanked his position, and achieved neutralization before he could respond effectively. The electronic scoring system registered another clean kill, and Maya was already planning her approach to Tommy's position. The engagement with Tommy Rodriguez proved more challenging, as he had heard the sounds of her engagement with Marcus and had repositioned accordingly. When Maya approached his corridor, she found that he had abandoned his original position and established a new defensive point that provided better cover and improved sight lines. This kind of adaptive thinking was exactly what made Tommy a valuable team member, and Maya respected his tactical flexibility even as she worked to overcome it. The key to neutralizing Tommy's new position lay in understanding his psychological profile and predicting his likely responses to pressure. Maya knew that Tommy was aggressive by nature and preferred to take action rather than remain in defensive postures for extended periods. She decided to exploit this tendency by creating a situation that would encourage him to abandon his strong defensive position in favor of a more aggressive stance that would leave him vulnerable. Maya began a systematic approach to Tommy's position, moving steadily forward while maintaining enough caution to avoid presenting him with an easy target. Her movements were designed to create psychological pressure, giving Tommy the impression that his position was gradually becoming untenable while offering him what appeared to be an opportunity to seize the initiative through offensive action. The strategy worked exactly as Maya had anticipated. After several minutes of watching Maya's careful approach, Tommy decided to abandon his defensive position and attempt to flank her movement. His transition from defense to offense created a window of vulnerability that Maya had been waiting for. She altered her own movement pattern to intercept his flanking attempt, and when they finally engaged, she had positioned herself with significant tactical advantages. Tommy's neutralization completed the first phase of the exercise, but Maya knew that the real challenges were still ahead. The building's upper level contained additional hostile forces, and the approach to that level involved navigating a stairwell that provided excellent opportunities for ambush. Master Chief Hayes had designed this portion of the exercise to test participants' ability to handle the most dangerous tactical situations that Special Operations Forces regularly encountered. Maya approached the stairwell with extreme caution, understanding that vertical movement in contested buildings was one of the most hazardous activities in close-quarters combat. Staircases created natural choke points where defenders held significant advantages, and ascending stairs while under fire required specific techniques and considerable courage. She had trained extensively for these situations, but training scenarios could never fully replicate the stress and uncertainty of actual combat. The first flight of stairs appeared clear, but Maya knew that appearances in tactical situations were often deceiving. She employed a careful movement pattern that allowed her to observe the upper level while minimizing her exposure to potential threats. Her patience was rewarded when she detected movement near the top of the staircase, indicating that at least one hostile force was positioned to engage anyone attempting to reach the upper level. Rather than attempting to fight her way up the staircase directly, Maya looked for alternative approaches to the upper level. The building's damaged structure provided several possibilities, including a partially collapsed wall that created access to an adjacent room with its own staircase. This alternative approach would require more time and physical effort, but it would also allow her to reach the upper level without fighting through the prepared ambush position. Maya's movement through the damaged structure required considerable physical agility and mental focus. The debris and unstable surfaces created numerous opportunities for injury or for creating noise that would alert hostile forces to her alternative approach. She moved slowly and deliberately, testing each step and handhold before committing her full weight, constantly aware that a single mistake could compromise the entire operation. When Maya finally reached the upper level through her alternative route, she found herself in an excellent tactical position. Jake Morrison was positioned near the top of the main staircase, exactly where she had anticipated finding a hostile force. But his attention was focused on the approach she had avoided rather than the direction from which she actually arrived. This situational advantage was exactly what Maya had hoped to achieve through her patient and methodical approach. Jake's neutralization was swift and decisive. His position, while excellent for controlling the main staircase, left him exposed to attack from his flanks. Maya was able to approach his position without being detected and achieve neutralization before he could respond effectively. The electronic scoring system registered the hit, and Jake's expression showed genuine surprise at how completely he had been outmaneuvered. The completion of the exercise represented more than just successful performance in a training scenario. Maya had demonstrated a level of tactical thinking and execution that clearly exceeded her teammates' expectations. Her approach to each challenge had been creative, professional, and effective, combining technical proficiency with strategic insight in ways that even Master Chief Hayes found impressive. As the team gathered for the post-exercise debrief, Maya could sense a subtle shift in the atmosphere. Her teammates' reactions ranged from professional respect to genuine surprise, and the casual dismissiveness that had characterized some of their earlier interactions seemed to have been replaced by more serious consideration of her capabilities. Tommy Rodriguez, in particular, seemed thoughtful about how completely she had anticipated and countered his tactical responses. Master Chief Hayes began the debrief by reviewing Maya's performance with a systematic thoroughness that characterized all of his training evaluations. He praised her tactical flexibility, her patient approach to intelligence gathering, and her creative use of the environment to overcome challenging tactical situations. His assessment was detailed and specific, focusing on the technical aspects of her performance rather than broader questions about her suitability for special operations work. Chin demonstrated excellent tactical decision-making throughout this exercise. Hayes observed his tone professional but clearly positive. Her approach to intelligence gathering was particularly impressive. She consistently chose patience over speed when patience provided tactical advantages, but she was also capable of rapid execution when situations required immediate action. The Master Chief's evaluation continued with specific examples of Maya's performance, including her use of audio distraction to locate hostile forces, her flanking maneuver against Marcus Williams, her psychological manipulation of Tommy Rodriguez, and her alternative approach to the upper level that allowed her to bypass Jake Morrison's ambush position. Each example demonstrated a different aspect of tactical competence, and together they painted a picture of comprehensive professional capability. Jake Morrison, who had been unusually quiet since his neutralization, finally spoke up during the debrief. His tone was more thoughtful than usual, lacking the casual confidence that typically characterized his contributions to team discussions. I have to admit, I didn't see that flanking approach coming at all. I thought I had that staircase locked down pretty effectively. Tommy Rodriguez nodded agreement, his Brooklyn Street wisdom adding perspective to the discussion. She read my psychology perfectly. I knew I was being manipulated into leaving that defensive position, but I couldn't figure out how to stay there without eventually getting picked apart. That's pretty sophisticated tactical thinking. Marcus Williams, ever diplomatic but clearly impressed, offered his own assessment of Maya's performance. The whole exercise showed really good integration of technical skills with strategic planning. It's one thing to execute individual techniques correctly, and it's another thing to combine them into an overall approach that accounts for multiple variables and potential complications. Maya listened to her teammates' comments with professional attention, appreciating the thoughtful analysis, but also remaining aware that one successful training exercise wouldn't necessarily change fundamental attitudes about her place on the team. She had learned over the past 18 months that proving herself was an ongoing process rather than a single achievement, and that maintaining her teammates' respect would require consistent performance across many different situations and challenges. Master Chief Hayes concluded the debrief by announcing the next exercise, which would involve a different scenario with rotated roles. Maya would now be part of the defending force, while her teammates took turns attempting to clear the building. This rotation was standard practice in training exercises, ensuring that everyone experienced both offensive and defensive challenges, but Maya understood that her performance as a defender would be scrutinized just as carefully as her performance as an attacker had been. As the team prepared for the role reversal, Maya noticed that the casual conversations that typically filled the break time had taken on a different character. Her teammates were discussing her tactical approaches with the kind of serious analysis usually reserved for evaluating combat footage or planning actual operations. The shift from dismissive tolerance to genuine professional interest was subtle but unmistakable, and Maya found herself cautiously optimistic that perhaps her consistent efforts to prove herself were finally beginning to pay dividends. The morning was far from over, however, and Maya knew that the most challenging portions of the training schedule were still ahead. The exercises would become progressively more complex and demanding, testing not just individual capabilities, but also team coordination and communication under pressure. Maya's success in the first exercise had earned her teammates' attention, but maintaining that attention would require continued excellence throughout the entire training session. As Jake Morrison prepared for his attempt at clearing the building, Maya took her assigned defensive position and began planning her approach to the new challenge. The tactical situation was now reversed, but the fundamental requirements remained the same: professional excellence, creative thinking, and the kind of sustained performance that separated elite operators from conventional soldiers. Maya was ready to demonstrate that her success in the first exercise was not a fluke, but rather an indication of her true capabilities as a member of SEAL Team 7. The role reversal brought new challenges and different pressures as Maya settled into her defensive position on the upper level of the training facility. Her assignment was to hold the northeast corner room, a position that provided excellent sight lines down one of the main corridors, but also presented significant vulnerabilities if an attacker could find alternative approaches to her location. The tactical complexity of defensive operations required a different mindset than offensive clearing operations, emphasizing patience, observation, and precise timing over movement and aggression. Maya studied her assigned area carefully, identifying multiple defensive positions within the room that would allow her to respond effectively to attacks from different directions. The key to successful defensive operations lay in maintaining flexibility while controlling key terrain, and Maya began planning contingency responses for various attack scenarios her teammates might attempt. She knew that Jake Morrison would be the first to attempt clearing her section, and his aggressive, direct approach would likely favor speed over subtlety. As she prepared her defensive setup, Maya could hear Master Chief Hayes briefing Jake on the new exercise parameters. The scenario was designed to test the attacker's ability to clear defended positions while minimizing casualties and maintaining operational security. Jake would need to neutralize all defending forces while avoiding civilian casualties represented by mannequins positioned throughout the building. The exercise emphasized the kind of precision operations that special forces regularly conducted in urban environments, where distinguishing between combatants and non-combatants was critical. Maya positioned herself where she could observe the main approach to her room while maintaining cover from multiple directions. Her defensive philosophy emphasized gathering intelligence about attacker movements before committing to engagement, allowing her to choose the most advantageous moment and position for confrontation. This patient approach sometimes frustrated her more aggressive teammates, who preferred decisive action over extended observation. But Maya had learned that patience often provided significant tactical advantages. The exercise began with Jake's entry into the building, and Maya immediately began tracking his movements through audio cues and brief visual contacts. Jake's approach was characteristically direct and confident, moving through the building with the kind of systematic efficiency that reflected his considerable training and natural athletic ability. However, Maya also noticed that his movement pattern was somewhat predictable, following standard clearing procedures without the tactical creativity she had demonstrated in the previous exercise. Maya allowed Jake to clear the lower level without interference, gathering intelligence about his preferred techniques and timing patterns. She observed that he was thorough, but not particularly patient, moving through each room with professional competence, but without the kind of extended observation that might reveal defensive preparations or alternative approach routes. This information would be valuable when Jake finally attempted to reach her position on the upper level. When Jake began his approach to the staircase, Maya was ready with a defensive plan that exploited his predictable movement patterns and aggressive nature. Rather than engaging him immediately when he appeared in her sight lines, Maya waited until he had committed to a specific approach route before revealing her position. This timing allowed her to achieve effective engagement while minimizing her own exposure to return fire. Jake's neutralization in the stairwell was swift and decisive, but Maya knew that her defensive success was only the beginning of the exercise. Tommy Rodriguez would be next, and his tactical approach was likely to be significantly different from Jake's direct methods. Tommy's Brooklyn Street background had given him an intuitive understanding of urban warfare that complemented his military training, and Maya expected him to attempt more creative approaches to her position. Tommy's attempt began with an extended reconnaissance phase that immediately distinguished his approach from Jake's more straightforward methods. Maya could detect careful movement throughout the lower level, but Tommy was taking much more time to gather intelligence about defensive positions and potential approach routes. His patience and methodical preparation indicated that he had learned from observing Jake's unsuccessful attempt and was planning a more sophisticated assault. Maya adjusted her defensive preparations to account for Tommy's more cautious approach, positioning herself to observe multiple potential routes while maintaining the flexibility to respond to unexpected tactical developments. Tommy's reconnaissance was thorough enough that Maya began to suspect he might attempt one of the alternative approach routes she had identified during her initial assessment of the defensive position. Her suspicions proved correct when Tommy began his actual assault using the same damaged wall structure that Maya had employed during her offensive operation. His approach was careful and professional, demonstrating excellent understanding of how to use the building's damaged areas for tactical advantage. Maya found herself genuinely impressed with Tommy's tactical creativity, even as she planned her response to his flanking attempt. The engagement with Tommy proved more challenging than her confrontation with Jake, requiring Maya to abandon her primary defensive position and establish a new one that could address his alternative approach route. Tommy's flanking maneuver was well executed and would have been successful against a less flexible defender, but Maya's willingness to abandon prepared positions in favor of tactical advantage allowed her to maintain the initiative throughout their engagement. Tommy's neutralization required Maya to demonstrate the same kind of tactical creativity she had shown during her offensive operations, using the building's structure and her understanding of Tommy's likely responses to create opportunities for successful engagement. The exercise reinforced Maya's growing reputation for tactical flexibility and strategic thinking, qualities that her teammates were beginning to recognize and respect. Marcus Williams approached the exercise with his characteristic systematic methodology, combining careful planning with professional execution in ways that reflected his communications background and technical training. Marcus had observed both Jake's and Tommy's attempts, and his approach incorporated lessons learned from their experiences while also introducing new tactical elements that reflected his own areas of expertise. Maya's engagement with Marcus proved to be the most technically challenging of the three confrontations, as Marcus employed communication techniques and coordination methods that simulated the kind of support he might receive from other team members in actual operations. His approach was methodical and professional, demonstrating excellent understanding of how to integrate individual capabilities with broader team resources. The exercise with Marcus also highlighted the importance of communication and coordination in special operations, as his simulated radio calls and tactical reports created a more realistic operational environment than the previous individual assault scenarios. Maya found herself responding not just to Marcus's direct actions, but also to the broader tactical picture he was creating through his communication activities. Marcus's eventual neutralization required Maya to demonstrate advanced understanding of communication warfare and signal intelligence, using her knowledge of standard military communication protocols to anticipate and counter his tactical coordination efforts. The engagement showcased abilities that went beyond basic combat skills, emphasizing the intellectual demands of modern special operations work. The completion of the defensive exercise marked a significant milestone in the day's training, as Maya had successfully demonstrated competence in both offensive and defensive operations against all three of her teammates. Master Chief Hayes conducted another detailed debrief, focusing on the technical aspects of defensive operations and the various tactical approaches demonstrated by each participant. Chen's defensive performance showed excellent adaptability and tactical flexibility, Hayes observed during his evaluation. She demonstrated the ability to maintain effective defensive positions while also remaining flexible enough to respond to multiple different attack scenarios. Her engagement with Rodriguez was particularly impressive, showing good understanding of how to counter alternative approach tactics. The Master Chief's assessment continued with specific analysis of each engagement, praising Maya's patient intelligence gathering, her effective use of timing in her engagement with Jake Morrison, her tactical flexibility in responding to Tommy Rodriguez's flanking attempt, and her sophisticated understanding of communication warfare during her confrontation with Marcus Williams. The evaluation was thoroughly professional and clearly positive, reinforcing Maya's growing reputation for comprehensive tactical competence. As the morning training session continued, Maya noticed that her teammates' attitudes toward her had continued to evolve. The casual dismissiveness that had characterized some earlier interactions had been replaced by genuine professional respect, and her contributions to tactical discussions were being received with serious attention rather than polite tolerance. The shift was subtle but unmistakable, representing the kind of acceptance that Maya had been working toward since joining the team. However, Maya also understood that respect earned through training exercises would need to be reinforced through continued excellence in more demanding situations. The afternoon training schedule included more complex scenarios that would test team coordination and communication under pressure, and Maya knew that her performance in these group exercises would be just as important as her individual achievements during the morning sessions. The morning had clearly demonstrated Maya's individual tactical capabilities, but special operations work ultimately depended on team performance rather than individual excellence. Maya's challenge for the remainder of the day would be to demonstrate that her individual skills could be integrated effectively into team operations, contributing to collective success rather than simply showcasing personal competence. Master Chief Hayes announced a brief break before the afternoon session, and Maya used the time to reflect on the morning's achievements and prepare mentally for the more complex challenges ahead. She had successfully proven that she could compete with her teammates in individual tactical scenarios, but the real test of her value to SEAL Team 7 would come during the team coordination exercises that emphasize collective performance over individual capability. As Maya prepared for the afternoon session, she felt a quiet confidence that hadn't been present when the day began. Her teammates had seen concrete evidence of her tactical abilities, and their responses suggested genuine respect for her professional competence. The foundation for true team acceptance had been established, but Maya knew that building on that foundation would require continued excellence and sustained performance in the more demanding exercises ahead. The break also provided an opportunity for informal conversation with her teammates, and Maya noticed that the tone of these interactions had shifted significantly since the morning briefing. Jake Morrison, in particular, seemed genuinely interested in discussing tactical techniques and approaches, treating Maya as a peer whose opinions and insights were worth serious consideration rather than as a newcomer whose presence on the team required justification. Tommy Rodriguez engaged Maya in detailed discussion about urban warfare tactics, drawing on both their military training and their respective civilian backgrounds to explore different approaches to tactical problems. The conversation was technical and professional, focusing on methodologies and techniques rather than personal relationships or team dynamics. But it represented exactly the kind of professional interaction that Maya had hoped to achieve with her teammates. Marcus Williams continued to demonstrate his diplomatic approach to team relationships, but his interactions with Maya now carried a warmth and genuine interest that had been absent from their earlier professional exchanges. His questions about communication warfare and signal intelligence reflected real curiosity about Maya's background and capabilities rather than polite conversation designed to maintain minimal social connections. The evolution of these relationships represented more than just personal acceptance. It reflected Maya's successful integration into the professional culture of elite special operations units. Her teammates were beginning to see her as a valuable contributor to team capabilities rather than as an obligation imposed by military policy or political considerations. This transition from tolerance to acceptance to genuine professional respect was exactly what Maya had been working towards since joining SEAL Team 7. As the break concluded and the team prepared for the afternoon training session, Maya felt that she had achieved something significant during the morning exercises. She had demonstrated her individual tactical competence in ways that her teammates could no longer ignore or minimize, and she had begun the process of establishing genuine professional relationships based on mutual respect rather than policy requirements or social obligation. The afternoon would bring new challenges and different pressures, but Maya approached these upcoming exercises with confidence and optimism that hadn't been present when the day began. She had proven herself capable of competing with her teammates on individual tactical challenges, and now she was ready to demonstrate that her individual capabilities could contribute effectively to team performance in the more complex operational scenarios that lay ahead. The afternoon training session introduced a completely different dynamic, as Master Chief Hayes announced that the next phase would involve team coordination exercises with visiting Marines from Camp Pendleton. The Marines, led by Gunnery Sergeant Rick Patterson, were conducting cross-training with various special operations units as part of a broader military initiative to improve inter-service cooperation and tactical integration. Maya immediately understood that this development would create new pressures and different challenges than the morning's intra-team exercises. The 8 Marines who filed into the training facility represented exactly the kind of traditional military culture that Maya had encountered throughout her career. They moved with the confident swagger that characterized elite conventional forces, their bearing and interactions reflecting the brotherhood mentality that dominated Marine Corps culture. Maya could see in their expressions and body language the same mixture of curiosity, skepticism, and casual dismissiveness that she had learned to navigate in countless similar situations. Gunnery Sergeant Patterson was a 20-year Marine veteran whose reputation for toughness and traditional values preceded him throughout the special operations community. His initial greeting to SEAL Team 7 was professionally courteous, but carried the undertone of competitive assessment that often characterized interactions between elite units from different services. Maya noticed that his attention lingered on her slightly longer than on her teammates, his expression reflecting the kind of evaluation she had learned to recognize immediately. "Gentlemen," Patterson addressed the group, his voice carrying the authority that came from 2 decades of leading Marines in training and combat situations. "We're here to work on some joint tactical scenarios that'll test how well different units can coordinate under pressure. My boys are looking forward to seeing how Navy Special Operations handles things when they've got some real Marines backing them up." The comment drew chuckles from Patterson's Marines and polite smiles from Maya's teammates. But Maya detected the competitive undercurrent that would likely characterize the entire afternoon session. Inter-service rivalry was a constant factor in military culture, and Maya knew that the Marines would be particularly interested in proving themselves against Navy Special Operations Forces. Her presence, as the only woman in the combined group, would add another layer of complexity to these dynamics. Master Chief Hayes outlined the afternoon's training scenario, which would involve a simulated hostage rescue operation in an urban environment. The scenario required close coordination between the SEAL team's specialized capabilities and the Marines' conventional assault skills, emphasizing communication, timing, and tactical flexibility under pressure. The exercise was designed to test exactly the kind of inter-service cooperation that was becoming increasingly important in modern military operations. Maya's role in the operation would be to provide overwatch and communication support for the main assault force, a position that required technical expertise and tactical awareness, but also placed her in a relatively protected position compared to the Marines who would be conducting the actual building clearance. She understood immediately that this assignment reflected both recognition of her capabilities and concern about how the Marines might react to taking orders from or coordinating directly with a female special operations soldier. The assignment frustrated Maya on multiple levels. While she appreciated the technical demands of Overwatch and communications work, she also recognized that the position would prevent her from demonstrating the kind of direct tactical capabilities that had earned her teammates' respect during the morning exercises. More importantly, she suspected that the assignment reflected assumptions about her physical capabilities and combat readiness that weren't based on objective assessment of her qualifications. However, Maya also understood that challenging the assignment directly would likely be counterproductive, potentially reinforcing perceptions that women in special operations were more concerned with personal recognition than team effectiveness. She decided to embrace the Overwatch role and demonstrate excellence within those parameters, using the opportunity to showcase different aspects of her professional competence while supporting the overall mission objectives. As the teams prepared for the exercise, Maya began establishing her Overwatch position in an elevated location that provided sight lines over the target building, while also offering communications relay capabilities for the assault force. The technical setup was complex, requiring coordination of multiple communication systems, observation equipment, and fire support protocols that would be critical to the success of the hostage rescue operation. Maya's preparation for the Overwatch role drew professional attention from several of the Marines, who seemed genuinely impressed with her technical competence and systematic approach to establishing effective support positions. Corporal Mike Jensen, a communications specialist with Patterson's unit, engaged Maya in detailed discussion about communication protocols and coordination procedures, treating her as a technical peer whose expertise was worthy of serious consideration. "I've never seen anyone set up Overwatch communications that efficiently," Jensen observed, his tone reflecting genuine professional respect. "You've got backup systems for your backup systems, and the whole setup is organized so you can manage multiple simultaneous communication streams without losing track of tactical priorities." Maya appreciated Jensen's professional recognition while also remaining aware that acceptance from individual Marines didn't necessarily reflect the attitudes of the group as a whole. Gunnery Sergeant Patterson's evaluation of her preparations was more reserved, his expression suggesting that he was withholding judgment about her capabilities until he could observe her performance under actual operational pressure. The exercise began with Maya providing intelligence updates to the assault force as they approached the target building. Her elevated position allowed her to observe potential threats and tactical complications that weren't visible to the ground forces, and her communication setup enabled her to coordinate between the SEAL team's specialized approach and the Marines' conventional assault tactics. The integration of different tactical philosophies required constant adjustment and real-time communication to maintain operational effectiveness. Maya's first major contribution to the operation came when she identified a simulated sniper position that threatened the Marines' planned approach route. Her observation skills and tactical analysis allowed her to vector the assault force away from the threat, while also coordinating a flanking maneuver that neutralized the hostile position before it could interfere with the main operation. The coordination required precise timing and clear communication, both of which Maya executed flawlessly. Gunnery Sergeant Patterson's response to Maya's tactical contribution was immediately noticeable. His radio acknowledgement carried genuine appreciation for her professional competence, and Maya could see through her observation equipment that his bearing toward her had shifted from skeptical assessment to respectful attention. The Marines under his command also seemed to be responding to their leader's evolving attitude, treating Maya's communications and tactical updates with serious professional consideration. The hostage rescue scenario continued with increasing complexity as the assault force encountered additional obstacles and complications that required adaptive responses and creative problem-solving. Maya's Overwatch position allowed her to maintain tactical awareness of the entire operational picture, providing her with perspective that wasn't available to the ground forces who were focused on immediate tactical challenges within their respective areas of responsibility. When the Marines encountered a tactical situation that their conventional training hadn't specifically prepared them for, Maya was able to provide guidance based on her special operations background and her elevated observational position. Her suggestions helped the Marines adapt their approach to overcome the unexpected challenge, demonstrating the value of inter-service cooperation and the importance of integrating different tactical perspectives in complex operations. Maya's growing influence on the operation's success was creating exactly the kind of professional recognition she had hoped to achieve, but it was also generating some unexpected tension within Patterson's Marines. Several of his soldiers seemed uncomfortable with receiving tactical guidance from a female sailor, regardless of her professional qualifications or the effectiveness of her contributions. The tension wasn't openly expressed, but Maya could detect it in radio communications and through her observation of body language and group dynamics. The situation came to a head when Staff Sergeant Tony Kowalski, one of Patterson's most experienced Marines, questioned one of Maya's tactical recommendations during a critical phase of the operation. His challenge was professionally phrased, but carried clear undertones of resistance to accepting guidance from someone he didn't consider a legitimate authority figure in combat operations. "Overwatch, we've been doing this kind of work for a lot longer than you have," Kowalski radioed, his tone carrying just enough disrespect to make his position clear without crossing the line into insubordination. "Maybe you should stick to calling out what you see and let us handle the tactical decisions." Maya's response was immediate, professional, and precisely calibrated to address Kowalski's challenge without escalating the confrontation unnecessarily. Copy, Ground Force. Overwatch will continue providing intelligence updates and tactical recommendations as requested by Mission Command. Your team leader can accept or reject those recommendations based on ground truth and operational requirements. Master Chief Hayes, monitoring all communications from the Exercise Control Center, immediately intervened to clarify command structure and communication protocols. His intervention was brief and professional, but it clearly reinforced Maya's authority to provide tactical guidance, while also emphasizing that all personnel were expected to maintain professional communication standards throughout the exercise. Gunnery Sergeant Patterson's response to the situation demonstrated exactly the kind of leadership that had earned him respect throughout the Marine Corps. Rather than defending his subordinate's challenge to Maya's authority, Patterson used the incident as a teaching moment about professional military relationships and the importance of maintaining disciplined communication during operations. Kowalski, Overwatch has provided accurate intelligence and effective tactical recommendations throughout this operation, Patterson radioed, his tone carrying the authority that ended all discussion about the matter. You will accept guidance from qualified personnel regardless of their service branch or any other factor that doesn't affect their professional competence. Is that understood? Kowalski's acknowledgement was immediate and clearly contrite, reflecting his recognition that he had overstepped appropriate bounds of professional military communication. The incident also seemed to clarify the operational dynamics for the other Marines, who resumed their previous pattern of professional cooperation with Maya's communications and tactical guidance. The exercise continued without further interpersonal complications, and Maya's contributions to the successful completion of the hostage rescue scenario were recognized by both Master Chief Hayes and Gunnery Sergeant Patterson during the post-exercise debrief. Her technical competence, tactical awareness, and professional communication had been essential elements in the operation's success, demonstrating exactly the kind of inter-service cooperation that the training exercise was designed to develop. However, Maya understood that the afternoon's events had revealed important information about the challenges she would continue to face as she progressed in her special operations career. While most military personnel were willing to work with female special operations soldiers professionally, there would always be individuals whose attitudes were influenced by factors other than objective assessment of professional capabilities. More importantly, Maya had learned that her response to these challenges would need to be carefully calibrated to achieve her professional objectives without creating unnecessary conflict or reinforcing negative stereotypes about women in combat roles. Her handling of Kowalski's challenge had been effective precisely because it had been professional, measured, and focused on operational requirements rather than personal considerations. The debrief session also provided Maya with valuable feedback about her Overwatch performance and areas where she could continue to develop her technical and tactical capabilities. Master Chief Hayes' evaluation was thoroughly positive, emphasizing her technical competence, tactical awareness, and communication skills, but he also provided specific suggestions for advanced training that would further enhance her value to special operations units. Gunnery Sergeant Patterson's comments during the debrief were particularly significant, as his initial skepticism had been replaced by genuine professional respect based on observed performance. His evaluation focused on Maya's tactical contributions and professional competence, treating her as a military peer whose capabilities have been demonstrated through action rather than assumed through policy or regulation. Your Overwatch support was outstanding throughout the exercise, Patterson told Maya directly, his tone carrying the weight of professional recognition from a senior Marine leader. Your tactical awareness and communication skills were exactly what we needed to integrate our conventional capabilities with your team's specialized approach. That's the kind of professional competence that makes joint operations successful. As the combined training session concluded, Maya reflected on the afternoon's events and their implications for her continued development as a special operations soldier. She had successfully demonstrated her capabilities in a different tactical role, earned the respect of visiting Marines through professional performance, and handled interpersonal challenges with a kind of measured professionalism that would serve her well throughout her military career. The day's training had proven that Maya could compete effectively with her SEAL teammates in individual tactical scenarios and contribute meaningfully to team operations that required coordination with other military units. More importantly, she had demonstrated the kind of tactical flexibility and professional maturity that characterized successful special operations personnel regardless of their background or personal characteristics. As the official training exercises concluded, Master Chief Hayes announced one final challenge that would cap off the day's activities. The scenario he described was unlike anything Maya had experienced during her time with SEAL Team 7, a completely improvised close-quarters combat demonstration where she would face all 8 Marines simultaneously in a controlled but realistic engagement designed to test her abilities under maximum pressure and numerical disadvantage. The announcement created an immediate shift in the atmosphere of the training facility. Maya's teammates exchanged glances that reflected their awareness of the extraordinary nature of what was being proposed, while the Marines responded with expressions ranging from professional curiosity to barely concealed skepticism about the wisdom of such an obviously unbalanced confrontation. Gunnery Sergeant Patterson's expression suggested that he was questioning whether the exercise served any legitimate training purpose or simply created unnecessary risk for everyone involved. This isn't a standard training scenario, Master Chief Hayes explained, his tone indicating that he understood the unusual nature of what he was proposing. But sometimes special operations personnel find themselves in situations where conventional tactical wisdom doesn't apply, where success depends on capabilities that can't be taught through standard methods, and where individual excellence becomes the determining factor in operational outcomes. Maya understood immediately that this final exercise was designed to test something beyond her technical tactical capabilities or her ability to work effectively within established military protocols. Hayes was creating an opportunity for her to demonstrate the kind of exceptional individual performance that separated truly elite operators from highly competent conventional soldiers. The challenge was both professional and personal, testing not just her physical and tactical abilities, but also her psychological resilience and competitive spirit. The Marines began preparing for the exercise with professional efficiency, but also with visible concern about the fairness and safety of the proposed scenario. 8 trained Marines against a single opponent, regardless of that opponent's qualifications, created obvious questions about whether the exercise would demonstrate anything meaningful about combat capabilities or simply provide an opportunity for gratuitous physical confrontation that served no legitimate military purpose. Staff Sergeant Kowalski, whose earlier challenge to Maya's authority had been firmly addressed by Gunnery Sergeant Patterson, seemed particularly uncomfortable with the proposed exercise. His body language and facial expression suggested that he was struggling with conflicting feelings about engaging in what might appear to be bullying behavior disguised as legitimate military training, regardless of his personal attitudes about women in combat roles. Maya spent the preparation time centering herself mentally and reviewing the tactical principles that would guide her approach to such an unconventional challenge. 8 opponents represented an overwhelming numerical disadvantage that couldn't be overcome through conventional tactical methods. But Maya had studied martial arts and close-quarters combat techniques that emphasized using opponents' numbers against them through positioning, timing, and psychological pressure. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her memory as she prepared for the engagement. His lessons about mental discipline and tactical patience had always emphasized that the most dangerous opponent was often the one who appeared least threatening, who remained calm under pressure, and who possessed the patience to wait for the right moment to act decisively. Maya had learned these lessons years before joining the military, but they had become fundamental elements of her approach to every challenging situation she encountered. The exercise area was configured to simulate close-quarters combat conditions without creating unnecessary risk of serious injury. Protective equipment and modified training weapons ensured that the engagement could be conducted with realistic intensity while minimizing the potential for permanent harm to any participant. Master Chief Hayes and Gunnery Sergeant Patterson established clear safety protocols and engagement rules that would govern the exercise while preserving its value as a realistic training scenario. As the participants took their positions, Maya noticed that the Marines had instinctively arranged themselves in a formation that reflected their conventional military training rather than adapting to the unique requirements of close-quarters combat against a single highly skilled opponent. Their positioning emphasized mutual support and coordinated movement, tactical principles that were effective in most combat situations, but potentially problematic in the confined space where the exercise would take place. The whistle sounded, and Maya immediately implemented a strategy based on movement, positioning, and psychological pressure rather than direct confrontation. Instead of engaging the Marines where they expected to find her, she used the training area's obstacles and cover to create confusion about her location, while systematically isolating individual opponents from their supporting teammates. Her first engagement was with Corporal Jensen, the communications specialist who had shown genuine professional respect for her capabilities during the afternoon exercises. Maya's approach to Jensen was swift and decisive, using his momentary confusion about her positioning to achieve rapid neutralization before his teammates could provide effective support. The engagement demonstrated the importance of speed and surprise in close-quarters combat, but it also showed Jensen's individual competence and professional training. The elimination of Jensen created exactly the kind of psychological pressure Maya had hoped to generate among the remaining Marines. Their formation began to tighten as they tried to prevent further isolation of individual team members, but their defensive positioning also limited their mobility and created opportunities for Maya to exploit their reduced tactical flexibility. Maya's next target was Lance Corporal Rodriguez, a young Marine whose aggressive nature made him vulnerable to the kind of tactical manipulation Maya had employed successfully against Tommy Rodriguez during the morning exercises. She created a situation that encouraged Rodriguez to abandon his position in pursuit of what appeared to be an opportunity for individual success, then used his isolation from his teammates to achieve rapid neutralization. The elimination of 2 Marines in quick succession had clearly rattled the remaining 6, who were now moving with the cautious uncertainty of soldiers who had discovered that their tactical assumptions were proving inadequate for the situation they faced. Maya could see in their movements and communications the growing awareness that they were dealing with an opponent whose capabilities exceeded their initial expectations. Staff Sergeant Kowalski attempted to reassert tactical control over the situation by directing his remaining teammates to establish a defensive perimeter that would prevent Maya from continuing to isolate individual Marines. His tactical thinking was sound in conventional terms, but the confined space of the training area and Maya's superior understanding of close-quarters combat principles allowed her to exploit weaknesses in his defensive arrangement. Maya's engagement with the defensive perimeter demonstrated advanced understanding of tactical psychology and group dynamics. Rather than attempting to break through the Marines' defensive position directly, she used movement and feints to create uncertainty about her intentions while gradually increasing psychological pressure on individual defenders who were struggling to maintain situational awareness in the chaotic environment. The breakthrough came when Maya successfully created enough confusion to isolate Sergeant Martinez, an experienced Marine whose technical competence was undermined by his unfamiliarity with the kind of unconventional tactical situation he was facing. Maya's neutralization of Martinez was swift and professional, but it also created a gap in the defensive perimeter that she immediately exploited to engage 2 additional Marines before their teammates could respond effectively. Private First Class Thompson and Lance Corporal Williams were eliminated in rapid succession, their neutralizations demonstrating Maya's ability to maintain tactical momentum while managing multiple simultaneous threats. The speed and precision of her actions were clearly beyond what the Marines had expected from any single opponent, and the psychological impact of watching their teammates eliminated so efficiently was beginning to affect the tactical decision-making of the remaining 3 Marines. Kowalski, Private Anderson, and Corporal Mitchell found themselves in the increasingly desperate position of trying to coordinate defensive actions against an opponent who had already demonstrated superior tactical capabilities and maintained complete psychological composure throughout the engagement. Their communications revealed growing uncertainty about how to proceed, and their movements showed the kind of hesitancy that often preceded tactical collapse under pressure. Maya's approach to the final 3 Marines emphasized patience over speed, allowing their uncertainty and defensive positioning to work against their tactical effectiveness. She had learned from her grandfather that the most decisive victories often came not from overwhelming force, but from allowing opponents to defeat themselves through poor decision-making under pressure. The psychological pressure Maya had created finally resulted in tactical mistakes that she was able to exploit decisively. Kowalski's attempt to coordinate an aggressive response to her positioning created exactly the kind of opening Maya had been waiting for, allowing her to neutralize him while simultaneously positioning herself to engage Anderson before Mitchell could provide effective support. Private Anderson's elimination left Corporal Mitchell in the impossible position of facing Maya alone after watching all 7 of his teammates eliminated through tactical methods that had proven completely effective against conventional Marine training and preparation. Mitchell's final stand was professional and courageous, but the outcome was never seriously in doubt given the tactical momentum Maya had established throughout the engagement. Mitchell's neutralization completed one of the most extraordinary individual combat demonstrations that anyone present had ever witnessed. Maya had successfully engaged and eliminated 8 trained Marines in a close-quarters combat scenario that most tactical experts would have considered impossible for any single operator to complete successfully. The performance was beyond impressive. It was genuinely exceptional in ways that redefined everyone's understanding of what elite individual capabilities could accomplish under the right circumstances. The immediate aftermath of the exercise was characterized by stunned silence, as everyone present processed what they had just witnessed. The Marines, despite their elimination, showed genuine professional respect for Maya's exceptional performance, while her SEAL teammates displayed expressions ranging from pride to amazement at what their teammate had accomplished against overwhelming odds. Master Chief Hayes' debrief of the final exercise was thorough and professional, focusing on the tactical principles Maya had employed and the lessons that could be learned from her systematic approach to a seemingly impossible challenge. His analysis emphasized the importance of psychological warfare, tactical flexibility, and individual excellence in special operations work, using Maya's performance as a case study in how exceptional operators could overcome seemingly insurmountable disadvantages. Chen's performance demonstrated advanced understanding of close-quarters combat principles and exceptional individual tactical capabilities. Hayes observed, his tone reflecting genuine admiration for what he had witnessed. Her systematic approach to neutralizing numerical superiority through positioning, timing, and psychological pressure represents exactly the kind of tactical thinking that distinguishes elite operators from conventional soldiers. Gunnery Sergeant Patterson's response to Maya's performance was equally positive and professionally respectful. His initial skepticism had been completely replaced by genuine recognition of exceptional military capability, and his comments reflected the kind of professional assessment that Maya had been working toward throughout her special operations career. "I've been training Marines for 20 years, and I've never seen anything like what Chun just demonstrated," Patterson stated clearly. "That wasn't just good training or superior technique. That was exceptional individual capability combined with tactical intelligence and mental discipline that represents the absolute highest levels of military professionalism." The day concluded with Maya having achieved something far beyond successful completion of training exercises or professional acceptance from her teammates. She had demonstrated capabilities that transcended normal expectations for special operations personnel, earning recognition that was based purely on observed performance rather than policy requirements or social considerations. Her quiet competence had finally found its voice through action rather than words. As the teams prepared to conclude the training session, Maya reflected on the day's events and their implications for her future in special operations. She had proven definitively that her presence on SEAL Team 7 was based on merit rather than political necessity, and she had established herself as an operator whose capabilities commanded genuine respect from anyone who witnessed her performance. The transformation in her teammates' attitudes was complete and unmistakable. Jake Morrison, Tommy Rodriguez, and Marcus Williams now treated her as a peer whose tactical opinions and professional insights were valued contributions to team discussions rather than tolerated perspectives from someone whose place on the team required justification. The evolution from tolerance to acceptance to genuine respect had been achieved through sustained excellence rather than dramatic gestures. More importantly, Maya had learned that her quiet approach to military professionalism was not a limitation to be overcome, but rather a strength to be leveraged. Her methodical preparation, tactical patience, and psychological discipline had proven to be exactly the qualities that distinguished exceptional operators from merely competent soldiers. The day's events had validated her approach to military service while also demonstrating capabilities that exceeded even her own expectations. As Maya gathered her equipment and prepared to leave the training facility, she understood that she had achieved something significant that would influence the remainder of her special operations career. She had proven that excellence spoke louder than politics, that capability mattered more than demographics, and that quiet competence could ultimately command the kind of respect that no amount of policy or regulation could mandate. The quiet Navy SEAL who had been mocked and dismissed had found her voice through action, proving that true strength often comes wrapped in unexpected packages. Maya Chun had earned her place among the elite through the most convincing argument possible. Undeniable, exceptional performance that spoke for itself.